In less than 24 hours, Jesus would be crucified, arrested, beaten, humiliated. And the most chilling part? He already knew. He knew who would betray him. He knew his closest friends would abandon him. He knew the cross was waiting. And still, he didn't run. He walked straight toward the suffering. Why? Because what was about to happen would change history forever. And it all began at a dinner table when Jesus revealed a secret that shocked everyone in the room. Jesus knew the betrayal had already begun, and still, he invited the betrayer to sit at his table. Inside the upper room, candlelight flickered across the faces of the 12 disciples. To them, it was just another Passover meal, a sacred tradition, a night of remembrance. But for Jesus, this dinner carried the full weight of what was coming. He knew this would be his final meal with them. Then he broke the bread, and he lifted the cup, and with calm, deliberate words, he gave both an entirely new meaning. This was no ordinary meal. It was his final message, a warning, a prophecy. Then suddenly, everything changed. Jesus looked around the table and said, "One of you will betray me." The room fell silent. Shock swept across every face, and one by one, they asked, "Lord, is it I?" The moment Judas stepped into the night, there was no turning back. With every step, he moved closer to betraying the Son of God. And for 30 pieces of silver, he made the choice. History would never forget. The deal was simple. Lead them to Jesus. Identify him with a kiss. And later that night, he returned to the Garden of Gethsemane. The garden fell silent until the sound of approaching footsteps broke the darkness. Torches flickered, armor rattled. Roman soldiers emerged from the shadows, and behind them walked Judas. Slowly, he approached Jesus. Then he leaned close and kissed him. A gesture once meant to express love had become the signal for betrayal. And then Jesus spoke. "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" The disciples froze. Confusion turned to panic. The final hours had begun. But before they could take him away, Jesus faced one final agony. A moment so intense that his closest followers could not stay awake to witness it. And in that lonely darkness, Jesus prayed a prayer that changed everything. The torches closed in. The soldiers seized Jesus. And within moments, the man who had just prayed alone in the garden was dragged into the darkness. His disciples scattered. Some ran in fear. Others disappeared into the night. For the first time, Jesus stood completely alone. Through the cold hours before dawn, he was taken before the religious leaders, and the accusations began immediately. False witnesses stepped forward. Voices rose. Anger spread. Chaos filled the room. But the verdict had already been decided long before the trial began. They wanted him condemned. And through it all, Jesus remained silent. No defense, no argument, no resistance. Then morning came, and Jesus was brought before Pontius Pilate. Pilate examined him carefully, and he saw no crime, no rebellion, no threat. For a moment, it seemed Jesus might be released, but outside, the crowd was growing louder. What began as whispers soon became chants. And before long, the chants became a roar. Crucify him. Pilate now faced a choice: stand for justice or surrender to fear. And with one decision, history took its darkest turn. Because what happened next would lead Jesus to a punishment so brutal, many never survived it. The sentence had been delivered. There would be no release, no mercy, no turning back. Beaten, broken, barely able to stand, then they placed the cross upon his shoulders, and the final walk began. Step by painful step, he was led toward Golgotha, the place of the skull. Crowds lined the path. Some watched in silence, some mocked, others wept. And with every step, his strength faded. By the time he reached the hill, his body was failing. Then came the moment that would echo through history. They stretched him across the wood, and with every violent strike of the hammer, iron pierced his hands and feet. Then the cross was lifted, and Jesus was raised between heaven and earth. Hours passed, and every breath became agony. Yet even then, he spoke words no one expected. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Not anger, not vengeance, forgiveness. Even then, even there. But the most haunting moment was still to come, because as darkness covered the land, Jesus cried out with words that have puzzled humanity for centuries. As Jesus hung upon the cross, an unnatural darkness covered the land. For hours, the sky itself seemed to mourn. The crowd that once shouted in anger now stood in silence. Even the soldiers grew still. And then, through the darkness, Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" To many, it sounded like despair. A broken man, abandoned in his final moments. But those words carried a deeper meaning, a meaning rooted in prophecy. And then came the final declaration, the words that would echo across history. "It is finished." This was not defeat, it was completion. The suffering had reached its purpose. The sacrifice had been made. The mission was fulfilled. And with his final breath, Jesus surrendered his spirit. Then suddenly, the earth shook, the ground trembled. And at that exact moment, something happened inside the temple. Something that changed everything. Something no one outside those walls could yet understand. In less than 24 hours, everything changed. A betrayal, an arrest, a trial, a cross. What looked like the end was actually the beginning. These final hours were not the collapse of a mission, they were its fulfillment. Every moment, from the upper room to the garden to Golgotha, unfolded exactly as it was meant to. To the world, it looked like defeat, but history would remember it differently, because what happened on that cross became the greatest act of redemption in human history. And nearly 2,000 years later, those final hours still echo across the world, still studied, still remembered, still changing lives. Because the story of Jesus did not end at the cross. It opened the door to something greater: hope, forgiveness, and the promise that even in humanity's darkest moment, light was still breaking through. The final 24 hours changed history forever. The question is, what do they mean to you? If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on what these final hours truly mean. And if you want to explore more moments that shape biblical history, subscribe to The Way of Jesus and share your thoughts below. What part of Jesus' final hours impacted you the most? Because some stories aren't just meant to be watched, they're meant to be remembered.